This is the Pimax Portal, and it confuses me. On paper, it has so much going for it. It has detachable wireless controllers, a 4K 144Hz QLED screen, and the guts to handle literally any game. It has active cooling, good build quality, a sleek design, so it should be a done deal with those features, right? Well, no, actually. Yes and no, sorta. It's just complicated, okay? Hello there, I'm TechDweeb, welcome. Thanks for clicking on the video today. The Pimax Portal is an interesting thing. It's not like any other device out there. One look at it and you can tell that it's not your normal everyday handheld gaming device. I've been living with this thing for about a month now, and it's taken me this long to really wrap my head around it. Initially, I had an entire mostly negative review written about it, but a few things have changed. There have been a few software updates that have fixed some of the issues, so I had to rewrite my review because now I kinda love it. The Portal has some truly amazing things about it, but it also has some truly not amazing things about it. And there's not a simple answer of whether or not this thing is good or bad or even what it is. But one thing I can say for sure, it's definitely an interesting thing. Let me start by telling you what the Pimax Portal is supposed to be. It's an Android handheld gaming device, a powerful one. That's one of the things that it's supposed to be, but it's also a Nintendo Switch, and it's made to be a multiplayer thing. But it's also VR. You can get a VR headset, and this Portal is the display for the headset. And the fact that it's trying to be so many things, I think, is where some of the weirdness comes from. I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all answer of whether or not it's good or not, but I'm gonna try to give you all of the info that you need to decide if it's right for you. And before we get too far into this, let me mention that on the video, when I'm recording the screen, you're gonna see some weird stripes on the screen, kind of moving stripes. This is just an artifact of filming this screen. It's impossible to film this screen without seeing that stuff. But just so you know that it's not there when you view it with your eyes. Unless your eyes are cameras, if you're a robot, in which case you will see it, but you won't care because you're a cold, unfeeling machine. Also, one more thing I should mention, I'm not going to be able to show you what the VR experience is like because I don't have the VR headset. I wasn't able to test that, but I think there's a lot of people who will be buying this with no intention to play VR, myself included. So this is just a review as a handheld gaming device. And go check out Taki Udon's video if you want to see the VR stuff. We gotta start somewhere, so let's do the controls. And we'll start with the obvious. The Portal wants to be a Nintendo Switch. There are Joy-Con style controllers on each side of the screen, and they come off to play with, but unlike the Switch, these are held on by very strong magnets, which is good because it holds them on nice and tight, but it's also bad because I have pinched myself really bad a few times. Pimax warns you the second you take this out of the box that these magnets are a pinching hazard, and they're not joking around. I literally drew blood. Be careful out there. The controllers are connected by Bluetooth, so you can take them off and play two-handed like a Nintendo Switch, if you're into that sort of thing for some reason, or you can snap them together in a sort of pro controller configuration. I wish they included a plastic middle part like the Switch did, because when they're together, the controller feels super small. And then you can play multiplayer just like a Switch. And if you get an extra set of Pimax Joy-Cons, you can connect them all up and play even 4-player games. There's an option in the quick menu of the device to change the controller mode from a single controller to multiple controllers. However, if you're using this with retro games, you'll still need to rebind those controls to play multiplayer games. So just know that you're likely to have to tinker a bit to get this happening. The main gripe that I've heard from most of the reviewers is that there's no real D-pad. We just get these segmented buttons that could sort of take the place of a D-pad, but really they're not much of a D-pad. And I agree, it would have been nice to have a real D-pad. But this actually isn't the biggest deal in the world, I don't think. Because you know what other console doesn't have a proper D-pad? The freaking Switch. And that sold like 129 million units. So I think we can give the Pimax a pass for not having a D-pad, considering that it's not a deal breaker for lots of people. I just use the joystick. I don't mind doing that. It's fine. It's better than fine, actually. It's a great joystick. The buttons are okay. They're kind of shallow and clicky, which is fine, but I hate the shape of them. You see how they're in this sort of teardrop shape? Well, the pointy part of the teardrop does not feel nice when you're going back and forth between these buttons, especially on the D-pad side. It actually kind of starts to hurt. It's a very confusing choice they made there with buttons in this shape. I kind of hate them. And then we have a bunch of other buttons. There's a back button and a home button and a sort of menu button. And on the other side, we have a function button, which brings up the quick settings. More on that in a bit. And a started select over here. And we also have 4 other buttons that you can rebind. At least you can now, since the software update. That was one of the things that I complained about in the last version of this video, but it's fixed now. However, the left and right bumpers on the tops of the little mini controllers, they still don't work. You can also hold the function button and use these 2 buttons over here as volume up and down, which is a nice update, especially since we don't have physical volume buttons on this thing. And the shoulder buttons are clicky, but I like them. And we have triggers, which feel really pretty good. They're analog triggers, but they have that tactile click at the end, which I don't love, but they work well in games. So the controls are fine, but there's a few missteps that prevent them from being amazing. And they're kind of weird, let's be honest. The screen. Oh man, the screen. There's a bit to talk about here. It's a 4K 144 Hz QLED screen, at least on the model that I have. On the cheaper version, it's an LCD screen. However, even though the screen is 144 Hz, currently the software can only run at 120 Hz. It's 4K resolution, but that's because of the VR stuff. Because in VR, you need a really high resolution screen with a high refresh rate. So you should just set it to 1080p because your eye will literally not even notice a difference. And then you won't drain your battery faster for no reason. The screen was my main gripe in the previous version of this review. Before the updates, there were major issues with the brightness, and it was hard to read the menus, and there was glitches and a substantial ghosting on moving objects. I freaking hated it. I had like a 5-paragraph rant about the various screen issues. But now, poof, like magic, they're all fixed by the updates. Almost all the issues. There's still a minor bit of a soft edge to light objects and a bit of shadow boxing around the edge of the screen, but it's vastly improved. I think it has something to do with the local dimming option that's there now in the settings. It's definitely the update that this thing needed. It's not amazing. I don't think the screen will blow you away. Even though it's 4K 144 Hz, practically it's just kind of average feeling overall, but it's good. And I'm not a fan of the system that they have on here. It's Android 10, which isn't great for compatibility with newer apps, and it's a weird version of Android 10. They have this launcher on the home screen, which isn't great. It's not super useful. It's just a line of small icons along the bottom, which you can't customize. They're just your recently used apps. At the home screen, you can press this little gear down here to open the device settings. And in here, you can pair controllers, change the power mode to adjust the performance versus the battery, change the fan speed, change the resolution and the refresh rate, and update the device. This is in addition to the regular Android settings, which you can access through the Settings app. Also, there's no notifications or quick settings bar that you can swipe down from the top of the screen. You know, like every Android device ever, if you want notifications, they're in this button on the home screen. Like, why? And then you can open your apps area and you can see your apps as tiles that you can't rearrange. And now you might be thinking, okay, well, the OS isn't great, but at least it's Android, so I could use my own custom launcher like Nova Launcher or Daijijo. Well, no, No, you can't. You can install custom launchers, but Pimax prevents you from choosing them as the home launcher. It'll just revert to the Pimax launcher if you try to switch it. Oh, I should mention that my device came with the Google Play Store installed. I saw some reviews say that theirs didn't have the Play Store installed, but mine did, for what it's worth. Anyways, it's a bit messy. Maybe this stuff will be fixed in a software update. That would be nice. Or at least give us the ability to swap to our own custom launcher, because that's one of the best things about Android, usually, being able to customize it. And it sucks that they're stopping us from doing that. And what about the performance? Well, the performance alone is reason enough to forgive most of my earlier gripes. Because let me tell you, the performance is amazing. I'd even go so far as to say it's freaking amazing. We have a Snapdragon XR2, which is a Snapdragon 865 equivalent with 8 gigabytes of RAM. So this thing can handle some stuff. The Portal advertising says play literally any game. And I didn't test literally every game, but I can confirm that every game I did test worked flawlessly, with performance that rivals every single handheld gaming device that I have that is not a handheld gaming PC. Android games like Genshin Impact or Call of Duty Mobile will run flawlessly, even at max settings. If your game doesn't have controller support, you can use the built-in screen mapper to map the physical controls to the on-screen touch functions. And that is one part of the Pimax software that I'm actually very happy with. It works perfectly. I love that we can game without compromises here. All the Android stuff that you could want will run awesome. Hey, editing TechDweeb here. I just wanted to mention that Fortnite did not launch. It says I need to disable USB debugging, but that's not an option on the portal, and I can't figure out how to disable it. So I think that's another thing that we'll need to wait for an update to get sorted if you want to play Fortnite. I should mention that when you're gaming, the device will warm up. It has active cooling on the back with a generous vent grill and a tiny little fan, and while it is audible when it's at max speed, it's not over the top. It's not overly distracting or annoying. I think they did a pretty good job with the cooling solution. And for emulation, well, obviously everything from the early systems is going to run flawlessly with amazing performance. All the Super Nintendo, Game Boy Advance, Nintendo 64, PlayStation, Dreamcast, that's not going to have any issues. You can play those games and upscale them to your heart's content. PSP is amazing. You can play any PSP game upscaled to 4x resolution or beyond, and you won't get any stuttering or slowdown. PSP was a 16:9 system, so seeing these games upscale to 1080p on a screen this size, they are super crisp and beautiful. GameCube is going to be a really good experience. You can upscale to 3x native resolution on most games, which is 1080p, but some few games will have slight performance issues, so I just leave it at 2x resolution, which is 720p, and that looks great at a screen this size. You can also use widescreen hacks if you're into that sort of thing. I was even able to play some of the harder to emulate games that struggle on weaker devices. GameCube is more or less good to go on here. If you've been looking for the GameCube handheld, this will not disappoint. 3DS is more or less good to go. I'm using the MMJ Citra fork and it has solid performance. Most games played good. Several of them had the usual stutters for shader caching, but overall everything I tried was playable and most played completely without issue, apart from the stutters and glitches. Touchscreen stuff and gyro stuff worked fine too, so that's nice. 3DS emulation is pretty new on Android and it's getting better all the time, but I have a hacked 2DS and I love that thing, so I don't usually bother emulating 3DS and dealing with touchscreen stuff and screen swapping and all that. This is one system that I prefer on the original hardware. And then we have PS2, and this was another great experience. I was able to emulate most PS2 games at 3x resolution, and running those games on a slick handheld device like this with widescreen hacks and upscaled, it's kind of magical. Not every game will run at 3x. Some of the more demanding games will need to go down to 2x, and for the most demanding games like Shadow of Colossus, you'll need to dip into the underclocking settings to get it to work at basically full speed. But it did run completely playable and enjoyable, and the vast majority of PS2 games will run upscaled and completely problem-free. And then we gotta talk about Nintendo Switch. The mainline version of Yuzu doesn't work because that requires Android 11, and we're only on Android 10 here. So we have Skyline, which does work, but the compatibility is all over the place. Some games work amazing, and they run great and look great, but some games are super glitchy, or they don't even launch, and even when I tried swapping out the video drivers, I couldn't fix them. But we could also use the Android 10 version of Yuzu, which is a new fork, and it's still in early development. Compatibility and performance was pretty good. Lots of games have glitches and aren't really playable, but lots of games are perfectly playable and really enjoyable. Switch emulation is still very new in development on Android, so it's understandable that it's not perfect across the board. I'm sure this will get all ironed out eventually, and when it does, I believe the Portal has the guts to be able to handle anything you throw at it. But for now, just think of Switch as a little bit of a bonus for the games that work. But the question on everybody's mind is, can it play Burger Time? Well, yes. Yes, it can. So now we come to the million bazillion dollar question. Should you buy it? Well, that depends. What is the Pimax Portal for you? Is it a handheld? Is it a multiplayer Switch thing? Is it a VR headset? It does a lot of things, but it fills many roles, so it really depends on your needs. But let's assume that you're looking for a handheld gaming console. That's what I think the best use case for this is, and that's what I use it as. So considering that, in terms of value, the cheapest model is $370, and that has an LCD with 128 gigabytes of storage, $400 for the LCD with 256 gigabytes of storage, and a big old $560 for the QLED version with 256 gigabytes. Now, I can't say if the QLED is necessary for VR, or what the difference between the LCD and the QLED is, because I've only tested the QLED version. But if it were me, I'd personally say that the $370 one, the cheap one, that's the one to get. That's where you'll get the same performance as the high-end model, but you won't be paying an extra $200 for a QLED screen and an extra 128 gigabytes of storage. So $370 for an Android device that plays up to and including PSP, GameCube, 3DS, PS2, and Switch. Not to mention every Android game at max settings with decent controllers that can be used on the device or off, and the ability to play multiplayer retro games, just like as if this thing was a retro-powered Nintendo Switch. That's solid, in my opinion. Pimax has been good about addressing issues that arise with updates and new features, and hopefully they'll keep doing that and let this device become all that it can be, even if it's not at that stage yet. I really do love it though, despite the shortcomings. It's my most powerful Android-based handheld, and I'm loving being able to play all these awesome games that I haven't been able to play on an Android handheld yet. I'll include some links in the description below if you'd like to pick one up. And that brings us to the end. Anyways, I hope you found this helpful. If you liked this video, then check out this video. It's for the RG405M, which is another great Android handheld that I love. There's a link on the screen and at the top of the description below. And that's it from me. I'm TechDweeb. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.